Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times, coming to you today from our studio in Washington, D.C. Joining me today are Defense News Pentagon reporter Noah Robertson and Defense News Air Warfare reporter Steve Losey. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming on here. It's been a tumultuous few weeks for the Defense Department. We saw the firing of C.Q. Brown, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, firing of Admiral Lisa Franchetti, the Chief of Naval Operations. Noah, talk to us about what this means both for Pentagon leadership and for the military, for the rank and file. Are they gonna see effects from this right away?
I think it's hard to know right now what the effects are really going to be because we're in uncharted territory right now. The Trump administration has made clear that those, even in the relatively or usually apolitical military, that do not agree with the agenda are off the books. They only want loyalty moving forward in the administration. And that's a huge change of mindset for a military that usually prizes independence from politics as a way to move forward. I mean, it's a cornerstone of American tradition there. That said, it's not even clear that General Brown or Admiral Franchetti are actually against the agenda in any reasonable way. It just seems that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was insufficiently inclined to believe that they were meritorious of their positions rather than what he calls diversity hires, despite there not being evidence to make that conclusion.
Just to really foot stamp this, this is not a usual thing. We do see a fair amount of turnover in civilian positions as we go from administration to administration, but these military positions are military. They're independent. This is held outside the place. So this is not. We haven't seen this in past administration changes.
No, it's a completely uncharted territory too. And just to foot stomp that even more, there have been past presidents who have thought about firing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. This happened with Colin Powell heading into the Bill Clinton administration in 1992. But that was considered absolutely beyond the pale for those presidents entering, both because somebody like Powell was a very powerful figure in Washington and beloved by the public, but also because it was seen as infringing on the independence of the military. So they decided not to go forward with that.
So I guess the question for both of you related to that is, are we surprised that this happened? I mean, there had been some rumors, but as you said, this is kind of outside of the normal scope of what we consider and what administrations consider. Are you shocked it happened?
To a certain extent, no. Secretary Hegseth certainly made no secret before his nomination that he was not a fan of General Brown. He made comments in interviews and in his book where he kind of implied that C.Q. Brown may not have been qualified for his role. General Brown, to be clear, is a decorated F-16 pilot. He helped lead the air war that crushed the Islamic State.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about him and his qualifications. Is he? I know we've had General Milley post his stint as chairman of the Joint Chiefs become kind of a political figure. We had Lloyd Austin, who was the civilian Secretary of Defense, but had the military background. So I think there's some muddling now and some confusion of who's a political figure and who's not. Where did CQ? You've covered him for years. You covered him from the Air Force side and then from the Joint Chiefs side. Where does he fit into this? Is he a political force here?
Not at all. He took pains to keep his leadership and his tenure at the Air Force outside of politics. He got criticized in recent months from some conservatives for what they perceived as his focus on diversity. General Brown is the first black service chief in U.S. history. That is true. He's a black pilot. He would talk about those from time to time, most notably after the George Floyd death. But and he would talk about diversity. But the vast majority of the time he spent talking was about on how to counter the threat from China. He authored a strategy called Accelerate, Change, or Lose on how to transform the Air Force. He had bipartisan support from both Republicans and Democrats for both his nominations. And let's also remember that President Trump himself nominated General Brown to be the Air Force Chief of Staff.
Yeah. And just to cut in there to add to what your point was, General Brown was clearly getting on board with the new administration's priorities when he was fired. In fact, he was visiting troops who have been newly deployed to the southern border.
And I think that's part of the shocking, maybe surprise here, is that there didn't seem to be a conflict, even though there was some of that chatter ahead of time, There didn't seem to be any pushback from the chairman at the time. It didn't seem to be things. I do remember after the George Floyd incident and the protests and the national outcry, the speeches that he gave. I think it was a public message that he put out talking about his own racial identity and some of the effects that had on his career and stuff. And I remember that being a very emotional moment. But beyond that, I don't remember him being really a voice for diversity and inclusion as much as he was just as just a military leader who was charged with executing some of that during the Biden administration.
That's right. A key thing a point that General Brown started to get very criticized for by conservative figures was a memo that he and other Air Force leaders signed, I think it was about 2022, that was about recruitment goals, aspirational recruitment goals for the officer ranks in the service. That was characterized in some corners as him implying that the Air Force needed to get rid of white officers, which is not at all what the memo said. However, that is something that some conservative commentators return to again and again, and some lawmakers as a weak political weakness to criticize General Brown.
Okay. Well, along with those dismissals, we've also received word from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth that the Defense Department is looking to trim at least 5,400, I believe it is, civilian positions. We actually have a clip of the Secretary sort of outlining what his goals are for that.
This reevaluation of probationary employees is being done across government, not just at the Defense Department, but we believe in the goals of the program and our leaders are carrying out that review carefully and swiftly. Now, bottom line, it is simply not in the public interest to retain individuals whose contributions are not mission critical and to restore accountability within the federal workforce. Taxpayers deserve to have us take a really thorough look at our workforce top to bottom, and it will be top to bottom, to see where we can find and eliminate redundancies. Now, common sense would tell us where we should start, right? We start with poor performers amongst our probationary employees because that is common sense and you want the best and brightest. So when you look at headcount, we're going to be thoughtful, but we're also going to be aggressive up and down the chain to find the places where we can ensure the best and brightest are promoted based on merit. And then we're going to go out, we're going to put out a hiring freeze and take more time to identify on a performance-based standard who we're going to hire and reward hard-working employees who are central to the core warfighting mission. So we're going to take a little bit more time, make sure top to bottom we're doing a review. Those who we need, who are the best and brightest, are going to stay. Those who are underperformers won't.
So Noah, talk to me about what that means. Do we have any sense of who these folks are going to be, when these cuts are going to be, and what it'll mean for the Defense Department in terms of their workforce?
I think the clearest thing that we can say right now is that this is just the start. Right now, there's a wider government effort led by Elon Musk and his so-called Department of Government Efficiency from the White House to re-examine not just what America's government does and how to make it more efficient, but really to cut through all of what they see as government bloat, waste, fraud, abuse. These are allegations that they put forward. It's not substantive so far that they have actually proven any of these are waste, fraud, or abuse. That hasn't stopped them from moving forward with a chainsaw, which Elon Musk himself brandished at CPAC, the conservative gathering just last week. This is starting in the Pentagon right now with the initial 5,400 cuts. That's going to be the start of a much larger effort to root out what they see as unnecessary positions. And they're starting first with probationary employees, which means that these are people who were just hired and are still in training before they assume the full roles.
Well, except with the probationary employee thing, that can also mean folks who were just promoted or switched to another job. We're seeing this widespread in the Department of Veterans Affairs right now, where they've laid off about 2,500 folks or 2,400 folks who were in probationary positions, but now we're hearing a lot of those were folks who maybe already have 10, 15 years in and just shifted to a different job, shifted to a different department. And now it's not that they're losing folks who don't have experience, they're losing folks who actually know what's going on there and have cut them out because just really because of technicalities.
And the effect of that is that everyone feels like they're now skating on thinner ice. People in the building are wondering, am I going to be a target in the future? Is my position necessary? Am I 4 or 5 years away from retirement, and they're going to want to cut my job before I get full benefits. People are now wondering whether they will be next. And that leads to a pronounced sense of anxiety that even I've sensed within the Pentagon.